Welcome to Big Breaking News of America. Genesis Episode 20. Rabbinic and Mystical Interpretations of the Patriarchal Narratives, Genesis 12:36. The Patriarchal Narratives, Genesis 12:36, form a theological and narrative cornerstone of the book of Genesis, chronicling the lives of Abraham, Abram, Isaac, and Jacob, whose covenantal relationship with God lays the groundwork for Israel's identity as a chosen people. These chapters shift from the universal concerns of the primeval history, Genesis 1:11, creation, sin, and humanity's dispersion, to the particular story of a family through which God promises land, Canaan, descendants, a great nation, and blessing, for all nations, Genesis 12:1-3. Organized by the Toledo generations formula, the narratives weave episodic stories of faith, conflict, divine intervention, and human frailty into a cohesive arc that prepares for Israel's emergence in the Torah's later books, Exodus, Deuteronomy. Rabbinic and mystical interpretations, developed over centuries, have profoundly shaped the understanding of Genesis 12:36, transforming the text into a dynamic source of theological insight, ethical guidance, and spiritual inspiration. Rabbinic exegesis, found in the Talmud, Midrash, for example, Bereshit Rabbah, and medieval commentaries by figures like Rashi and Ramban, employs close textual analysis, narrative expansion, and ethical reflection to uncover the text's deeper meanings. Mystical interpretations, primarily through the Zohar and Kabbalistic thought, view the narratives as allegories of divine attributes and cosmic processes, revealing spiritual truths. Together, these traditions address the needs of Jewish communities, from Second Temple Judaism to the medieval diaspora and modern era, while influencing Christian and Islamic theology and global cultural narratives. This exploration examines the methodologies, key interpretations of major episodes, theological themes, historical context, and cultural impact of rabbinic and mystical approaches, highlighting their role in making Genesis 12:36 a living text. 1. Rabbinic exegesis, methods and approaches. Rabbinic exegesis, encompassing the Talmud, Midrash, and medieval commentaries, seeks to uncover the Torah's multifaceted meanings through close textual analysis, narrative expansion, Midrash, and ethical reflection. Developed during the Second Temple period, c. 516 BCE 70 CE, and formalized in the Talmudic era, c. 200-500 CE, these interpretations respond to communal needs, from legal guidance to theological reassurance, while preserving the text's sanctity. Methodologies. Midrashic interpretation, Midrash, meaning to search or interpret, fills textual gaps, resolves ambiguities, and derives lessons from narrative details. Bereshit Rabbah, c. 5th century CE, a key Midrash on Genesis, employs a Gadic, narrative, Midrash to explore theological and ethical themes, often using parables, wordplay, gematria, and intertextual connections. For example, it links Abraham's call, Genesis 12:1, to his rejection of idolatry, expanding the narrative to emphasize monotheism. Talmudic analysis. The Babylonian Talmud, c. 500 CE, integrates halakhic, legal, and Agadic discussions, citing Genesis 12:36 to derive ethical principles and historical insights. For instance, Abraham's intercession for Sodom, Genesis 18:22-33, is praised as chaste, loving kindness, Sanhedrin 99b, modeling compassion. Medieval commentaries. Medieval scholars like Rashi, 1040-1105 CE, and Ramban, Nachmanides, 1194-1270 CE, combine Peshat, plain meaning, with Dirash, homiletic interpretation. Rashi clarifies grammar and context, often citing Midrash, while Ramban emphasizes theological and historical depth, linking the patriarch's actions to Israel's destiny. Ethical and theological focus. Rabbinic exegesis views the patriarchs as moral exemplars whose actions prefigure Israel's history. The covenant, Genesis 12:1-3, is seen as eternal, guiding Jewish identity, while human flaws, for example, Jacob's deception, Genesis 27, invite ethical reflection and teshuvah, repentance. Historical context. Rabbinic interpretations emerged in response to historical challenges. Second Temple Judaism faced Hellenistic assimilation, while the Talmudic era addressed Roman persecution and diaspora life. The Babylonian exile, 587–539 BCE, and subsequent dispersions made Genesis 12:36's themes of covenant, land, and divine faithfulness vital for communal hope. Medieval commentators like Rashi and Ramban wrote amidst Christian and Islamic dominance, using exegesis to affirm Jewish identity and counter theological challenges. Rashi's accessible style suited communal study, while Ramban's mystical leanings bridged exegesis and Kabbalah. The narrative's oral tradition roots, likely recited in tribal settings, informed rabbinic methods, with Midrash preserving storytelling's interpretive openness. Cultural significance. Rabbinic exegesis shapes Jewish liturgy, education, and ethics, with Genesis 12:36 central to Torah readings, Parshiot like Lech Lecha, Chayes era, festivals, for example, Rosh Hashanah Kedat, and study, Shevruta. It influences interfaith theology, with Christian scholars, for example, Augustine, and Islamic commentators, for example, Al-Tabari, engaging rabbinic insights, fostering dialogue. Globally, Midrashic storytelling inspires narrative expansion in literature, art, and film, enriching cultural interpretations of biblical themes. Two key rabbinic interpretations of major episodes. Rabbinic exegesis offers detailed interpretations of key episodes in Genesis 12:36, uncovering theological, ethical, and historical meanings. Below are analyses of major episodes, drawing on Bereshit Rabbah, Talmud, Rashi, Ramban, and other sources. Abraham's call and migration, Genesis 12:1-9. Midrashic interpretation, Bereshit Rabbah, 38 hours 13 minutes, portrays Abraham's departure from Haran as a rejection of idolatry, citing his father Terah's idol-making, Joshua 24:2. God's command, go from your country, Genesis 12:1, is a spiritual leap, making Abraham the first monotheist. The Midrash counts 10 trials for Abraham, starting with this migration, proving his faith. Talmudic insight. The Talmud, Bava Batra 91a, sees Abraham's obedience as a model of trust, Patriarchal, inspiring Jewish resilience in diaspora. His altars, Genesis 12:7-8, are communal worship, prefiguring the temple. Rashi's commentary. Rashi explains, I will make your name great, Genesis 12:2, as prosperity and influence, with the universal blessing, Genesis 12:3, ensuring Abraham's legacy. He cites Midrash to clarify God's gradual revelation of the land. Ramban's perspective. Ramban views the call as initiating the covenant, with Abraham's migration mirroring Israel's exodus and return. He links the altars to claiming Canaan, a historical precedent for Jewish land rights. Theological significance. The episode establishes Abraham as the covenant's pioneer, with his faith and obedience modeling emunah. It prefigures Israel's mission to bless all nations, Isaiah 42:6, central to Jewish identity. Cultural impact. The interpretation shapes Jewish liturgy, Avo prayer, Zionist narratives of return, and global stories of faith-driven journeys, from religious pilgrimage to secular quests. Covenant ceremonies. Genesis 15:17. Midrashic interpretation. Bereshit Rabbah, 44 hours 14 minutes, sees Genesis 15:6. He believed the Lord, as Abraham's ultimate trust, earning righteousness, Sadiq. The covenant between the pieces, Genesis 15:7-21, foreshadows Israel's exiles and redemptions, with the fire pit symbolizing divine presence. Talmudic insight. The Talmud, Nedarim 32a, praises Abraham's faith as surpassing Noah's, linking circumcision, Genesis 17:10-14, to spiritual purification. It derives halakhic rules for Brit Milah from Genesis 17. Rashi's commentary. Rashi clarifies the stars, Genesis 15:5, as countless descendants, citing Midrash to explain circumcision as a covenantal seal, distinguishing Israel from other nations. Ramban's perspective. Ramban interprets the covenant as eternal, with the land promise, Genesis 15:18-21, guaranteeing Israel's restoration. He sees circumcision as a physical and spiritual bond, prefiguring the Mosaic covenant. Theological significance. The covenant is the Torah's theological foundation, with Abraham's faith and circumcision embodying divine-human partnership, central to Jewish ritual and identity. Cultural impact. The interpretation informs Brit Milah, Jewish liturgy, and interfaith theology, for example, Romans 4, inspiring global narratives of commitment, from religious covenants to secular contracts. Binding of Isaac, Akedah, Genesis 22. Midrashic interpretation. Bereshit Rabbah, 56 hours 10 minutes, views the Akedah as Abraham's ultimate trial, with Isaac willingly submitting, symbolizing Israel's devotion. The ram, Genesis 22:13, is divine provision, linked to the temple's sacrifices. The Midrash sees the episode as meriting Israel's redemption. Talmudic insight. The Talmud, Ta'anit 16a, connects the Akedah to Rosh Hashanah as shofar, invoking Abraham's merit, Zekatavo. It debates Isaac's age, emphasizing his agency. Rashi's commentary. Rashi cites Midrash to portray Abraham's unwavering obedience, with God will provide, Genesis 22:8, as prophetic trust. He explains Mount Moriah as the Temple Mount. Ramban's perspective. Ramban sees the Akedah as testing Abraham's love for God, with Isaac's survival affirming divine mercy. He links the episode to Israel's covenantal endurance. Theological significance. The Akedah underscores faith, sacrifice, and divine provision, shaping Jewish liturgy and ethics, with parallels in Christian, Hebrews 11:17-19, and Islamic, Surah As-Safat 37:99-113, theology. Cultural impact. The interpretation informs Rosh Hashanah, Jewish art, and global narratives of sacrifice, from Kierkegaard's Fear and Trembling to modern ethical debates. Hagar and Ishmael, Genesis 16:21. Midrashic interpretation. Bereshit Rabbah 45:5 praises Hagar's faith, noting her naming of God as El Roi, Genesis 16:13. It sees Ishmael's rescue, Genesis 21:17-21, as divine mercy, with his descendants fulfilling God's promise, Genesis 17:20. Talmudic insight. The Talmud, Rosh Hashanah 16b, includes Hagar's prayer in Rosh Hashanah's merit, emphasizing universal compassion. It debates Ishmael's character, affirming his repentance. Rashi's commentary. Rashi explains Hagar's expulsion as protecting Isaac's covenantal role, with God's provision, Genesis 21:19, showing care for the marginalized. Ramban's perspective. Ramban views Hagar's story as a test of Sarah's faith, with Ishmael's prosperity reflecting divine inclusivity, prefiguring Israel's ethical mission. Theological significance. The episode highlights divine mercy and human complexity, shaping Jewish ethics of inclusivity and interfaith dialogue with Islam, where Hagar, is central. Cultural impact. The interpretation informs Jewish social justice, feminist theology, and Islamic Hajj narratives, inspiring global stories of marginalized voices. Jacob's deception and Bethel vision, Genesis 27:28. Midrashic interpretation. Bereshit Rabbah 65 hours 18 minutes, defends Jacob's deception as fulfilling God's oracle, Genesis 25 hours 23 minutes, with Rebekah's role as prophetic. The Bethel vision, Genesis 28:10-22, is Jacob's spiritual awakening, with the ladder linking heaven and earth. Talmudic insight. The Talmud, Megillah 17a, sees Jacob's vow, Genesis 28:20-22, as a model of prayer, prefiguring synagogue worship. It critiques Jacob's deceit, emphasizing teshuvah. Rashi's commentary. Rashi justifies Jacob's actions via divine will, explaining the ladder as angels accompanying him, with Bethel as a holy site. Ramban's perspective. Ramban critiques Jacob's ethics but sees the vision as covenantal reaffirmation, linking it to Israel's destiny. He views Rebekah as orchestrating divine plan. Theological significance. The episode balances human frailty and divine guidance, with Jacob's transformation prefiguring Israel's spiritual journey, central to Jewish identity. Cultural impact. The interpretation shapes Jewish ethics, liturgy, ma'ariv prayer, and global narratives of transformation, from art, shigol, to literature. Jacob's wrestling and renaming, Genesis 32:22-32. Midrashic interpretation. Bereshit Rabbah 77:3 identifies Jacob's opponent as Esau's angel, with the wrestling symbolizing Israel's spiritual striving. The name Israel, he strives with God, marks his covenantal role. Talmudic insight. The Talmud, Chulin 91a, derives halakhic rules from the sinew injury, Genesis 32 hours 32 minutes, linking the episode to Jewish practice. It sees Jacob's victory as divine favor. Rashi's commentary, Rashi explains the wrestling as a test of Jacob's faith, with the renaming affirming his leadership. He cites Midrash to identify the opponent as an angel. Ramban's perspective, Ramban views the wrestling as a mystical encounter, with Israel's name prefiguring the nation's resilience. He links it to exile and redemption. Theological significance, the episode underscores transformation and divine-human partnership, with Israel's name shaping Jewish identity and hope. Cultural impact, the interpretation informs Jewish Teshuvah, liturgy, and global narratives of struggle and renewal, from religious texts to secular stories. 3 mystical interpretations, the Zohar and Kabbalistic thought. Mystical interpretations, primarily through the Zohar, c. 13th century CE, and Kabbalistic thought, view Genesis 12:36 as an allegory of divine attributes, Sphirot, and cosmic processes, revealing spiritual truths about God, humanity, and the universe. Developed in medieval Spain by figures like Moses de Leon, Kabbalah builds on rabbinic exegesis but emphasizes esoteric meanings, transforming the narratives into a metaphysical framework. Methodologies. Zoharic allegory. The Zohar interprets the Torah as a symbolic text, with narratives reflecting the Sphirot, divine emanations like chaste, loving kindness, Gevurah, strength, and Tiferet, harmony. The patriarchs embody these attributes, with their actions aligning divine and human realms. Cosmic and spiritual focus. Kabbalistic readings see Genesis 12:36 as a blueprint for spiritual ascent, with episodes like the Akedah, Genesis 22, and Jacob's ladder, Genesis 28:10-22, symbolizing unification of divine attributes or the soul's journey to God. Mystical ethics. The Zohar integrates ethical lessons, viewing the patriarchs' faith and chaste as models for aligning with divine will, influencing Jewish spirituality and practice. Intertextual and symbolic analysis. Kabbalists use wordplay, numerology, gematria, and biblical cross-references to uncover hidden meanings, often linking Genesis to the Shekinah, divine presence, or creation's restoration. Historical context. Kabbalah emerged in the medieval period, amidst Christian and Islamic intellectual currents, with the Zohar responding to philosophical challenges, for example, Maimonides' rationalism, and Jewish persecution. Its esoteric focus offered spiritual refuge, especially after the Spanish expulsion, 1492 CE. The Zohar builds on earlier mystical traditions, like the Sfer Yetzirah, c. 2nd 6th century CE, and rabbinic midrash, integrating Aggadah with metaphysical speculation. The narrative's oral and exilic roots, emphasizing divine faithfulness, resonated with Kabbalistic themes of exile and redemption, mirroring the Shekinah's exile. Cultural significance. Mystical interpretations enrich Jewish spirituality, influencing prayer, Kabbalat Shabbat, meditation, and Hasidic thought, with Genesis 12:36 central to mystical study. They impact interfaith theology, with Christian Kabbalists, for example, Pico della Mirandola, and Islamic Sufis engaging similar esoteric themes, fostering dialogue. Globally, Kabbalistic symbolism inspires art, literature, and philosophy, from Renaissance mysticism to modern spiritual movements, broadening the narrative's reach. 4 key mystical interpretations of major episodes. The Zohar and Kabbalistic thought offer profound interpretations of Genesis 12:36, viewing the patriarchs as embodiments of Sphirot and their stories as cosmic dramas. Below are analyses of key episodes, drawing on the Zohar and later Kabbalistic sources. Abraham's call and migration, Genesis 12:1-9. Zoharic interpretation. The Zohar, Lech Lecha 76b, sees Abraham as chaste, initiating divine flow into the world. His departure from Haran is a spiritual ascent, leaving material attachments for divine unity. The universal blessing, Genesis 12:3, aligns the Shekinah with humanity. Kabbalistic perspective, Abraham's altars, Genesis 12:7-8, channel divine energy, with Canaan as the Shekinah's dwelling. His migration mirrors the soul's journey to God, a model for mystical practice. Theological significance. The episode represents divine-human partnership, with Abraham's chaste uniting creation, central to Kabbalistic cosmology. Cultural impact. The interpretation inspires Jewish mysticism, Hasidic devotion, and global spiritual narratives, from meditation to New Age thought. Covenant ceremonies, Genesis 15:17. Zoharic interpretation. The Zohar, Lech Lecha 89a, views the covenant between the pieces as unifying chaste and Gevurah, with the fire pot symbolizing the Shekinah. Circumcision, Genesis 17, purifies the body, aligning it with divine holiness. Kabbalistic perspective. The covenant is a cosmic bond, with Abraham's faith, Genesis 15:6, activating divine flow. The land promise reflects creation's restoration, linked to the Ein Sof, infinite God. Theological significance. The covenant symbolizes spiritual alignment, with circumcision as a mystical act, shaping Jewish ritual and Kabbalistic ethics. Cultural impact. The interpretation informs Brit Milah, mystical liturgy, and interfaith views of covenant, influencing spiritual practices worldwide. Binding of Isaac, Akedah, Genesis 22. Zoharic interpretation. The Zohar, Vayera 1:19b, sees the Akedah as balancing chaste, Abraham, and Gevurah, Isaac, with the ram unifying divine attributes. Mount Moriah is the cosmic center, linking heaven and earth. Kabbalistic perspective. The Akedah is the soul's sacrifice, with Abraham's faith elevating creation. It prefigures the temple's atonement, central to mystical prayer. Theological significance. The episode symbolizes divine unity and spiritual devotion, shaping Kabbalistic views of sacrifice and redemption. Cultural impact. The interpretation informs Rosh Hashanah, Jewish mysticism, and global narratives of sacrifice, from religious art to philosophical works. Hagar and Ishmael, Genesis 16:21. Zoharic interpretation. The Zohar, Lech Lecha 93a, views Hagar as a spiritual figure, with her vision of God, Genesis 16:13, reflecting divine compassion. Ishmael's rescue aligns chaste with the non-covenantal line. Kabbalistic perspective. Hagar's wilderness is the Shekinah's exile, with her salvation symbolizing universal redemption, linked to creation's repair, Tikkun. Theological significance. The episode underscores divine inclusivity, shaping Kabbalistic ethics and interfaith dialogue with Islam. Cultural impact. The interpretation inspires Jewish social justice, feminist mysticism, and Islamic narratives, influencing global stories of compassion. Jacob's ladder and Bethel, Genesis 28:10-22. Zoharic interpretation. The Zohar, Vaitz 147b, sees the ladder as the Sfirat's ladder, linking Makhat, Shekinah, to Keter, divine crown. Jacob, as Tiferet, unifies divine attributes, with Bethel as the cosmic center. Kabbalistic perspective. The vision is the soul's ascent, with Jacob's vow, Genesis 28:20-22, activating divine flow, prefiguring prayer and Torah study. Theological significance. The episode symbolizes divine human connection, central to Kabbalistic spirituality and Jewish worship. Cultural impact. The interpretation informs Jewish liturgy, mystical art, and global narratives of divine encounter, from poetry to spiritual literature. Jacob's wrestling and renaming, Genesis 32:22-32. Zoharic interpretation. The Zohar, Vaishlach 170a, views the wrestling as Jacob overcoming the Sitra Achra, evil force, with the name Israel aligning Tiferet with divine unity. The dawn symbolizes redemption. Kabbalistic perspective. The episode is the soul's struggle, with Israel's name marking spiritual elevation, prefiguring the nation's mission. Theological significance. The wrestling underscores transformation and divine partnership, shaping Kabbalistic views of redemption and identity. Cultural impact. The interpretation inspires Jewish Teshuvah, Hasidic thought, and global narratives of struggle, from religious texts to secular stories. 5 theological themes and contributions. Rabbinic and mystical interpretations amplify the theological themes of Genesis 12:36, enriching their significance for Jewish theology and beyond. Covenant and divine faithfulness. Rabbinic exegesis views the covenant, Genesis 12:1-3, as eternal, with Abraham's faith, Genesis 15:6, and circumcision, Genesis 17, binding Israel to God. Bereshit Rabbah links the covenant to Israel's redemptions, while Rashi and Ramban see it as historical destiny. The Zohar interprets the covenant as a cosmic bond, with the patriarchs aligning Sfirat to sustain creation. It underscores divine faithfulness, with the Shekinah accompanying Israel in exile. Contribution. These interpretations make the covenant a living reality, shaping Jewish ritual, Brit Milah, liturgy, and hope, while influencing interfaith views of divine promise. Faith and human response. Rabbinic sources praise Abraham's faith, Genesis 15:6, and Jacob's transformation, Genesis 32:22-32, as models of emunah and teshuvah. The Talmud and Rashi emphasize ethical growth, with the Akedah as ultimate devotion. The Zohar sees faith as aligning with chaste, Abraham, Gevurah, Isaac, and Tiferet, Jacob, with human actions activating divine flow, central to mystical practice. Contribution. The theme inspires Jewish ethics, prayer, and spirituality, with parallels in Christian, Romans 4, and Islamic, Surah al-Baqarah 2:1-4, theology, influencing global narratives of trust. Divine providence and mercy. Rabbinic exegesis highlights providence in episodes like Rebekah's betrothal, Genesis 24, and Hagar's rescue, Genesis 21:17-21, with Bereshit Rabbah and Rashi emphasizing chaste. Abraham's intercession, Genesis 18:22-33, models divine responsiveness. The Zohar views providence as the Shekinah's guidance, with mercy flowing from chaste, uniting covenantal and non-covenantal lines, as in Ishmael's salvation. Contribution. The theme shapes Jewish chaste, liturgy, Yom Kippur, and social justice, with interfaith parallels in Christian grace and Islamic mercy, inspiring global compassion narratives. Human frailty and growth. Rabbinic sources address human flaws, with Bereshit Rabbah defending Jacob's deception, Genesis 27, as divine will, while Ramban critiques it, emphasizing Teshuvah. Women's agency, for example, Rebecca, Genesis 27, is praised as covenantal. The Zohar sees frailty as the soul's struggle, with Jacob's wrestling, Genesis 32:22-32, overcoming the Sitra Achra, symbolizing spiritual growth and tikkun. Contribution. The theme informs Jewish Mussar, Christian redemption, and Islamic repentance, influencing ethical growth in religious and secular contexts. Land and identity. Rabbinic exegesis views the land promise, Genesis 12:7, as eternal, with Bereshit Rabbah linking Abraham's altars to the temple, and Ramban seeing Machpelah, Genesis 23, as Israel's claim. The patriarch's sojourning mirrors exile and return. The Zohar interprets Canaan as the Shekinah's dwelling, with sojourning as spiritual exile, and return, Genesis 33, as cosmic restoration. Contribution. The theme shapes Jewish attachment to Israel, Zionist thought, and diaspora identity, with interfaith parallels in spiritual homeland narratives. 6. Historical and cultural impact. Rabbinic and mystical interpretations have profoundly shaped Jewish tradition, interfaith theology, and global culture, ensuring Genesis 12:36's vitality. Jewish tradition. Liturgy and ritual. The Akedah, Genesis 22, is central to Rosh Hashanah, with Zekutavo invoking patriarchal merit. Brit Milah, Genesis 17, and prayers, Avo, Ma'ariv, draw on the narratives, reinforcing covenantal identity. Education and ethics. Rabbinic exegesis informs Torah study, with Shevruta exploring midrashic insights, and Mussar drawing on the patriarch's virtues. The Zohar shapes Hasidic devotion, emphasizing spiritual growth. Communal identity. The interpretations unify Jewish communities, from exilic Babylon to modern Israel, with the covenant and land themes central to Zionism and diaspora life. Interfaith theology. Christianity. Rabbinic insights influence Christian exegesis, with Augustine citing Abraham's faith, Genesis 15:6, and the Akedah prefiguring Christ, Hebrews 11:17-19. Kabbalistic symbolism resonates in Christian mysticism, enhancing dialogue. Islam. Islamic commentators engage rabbinic traditions, with Ibrahim's covenant, Surah al-Baqarah 2:124, and Hagar's story paralleling midrashic themes, fostering Abrahamic dialogue. Contribution. The interpretations enrich interfaith initiatives, like the Abrahamic family house, promoting shared heritage and peace. Global culture. Literature and art. Midrashic storytelling inspires Jewish and secular literature, from medieval tales to modern novels, for example, Anita Diamant's The Red Tent. Kabbalistic imagery influences art, from Chagall's biblical paintings to contemporary works. Philosophy and ethics. The Akedah shapes philosophical reflections, for example, Kierkegaard, while rabbinic ethics inform human rights and social justice, drawing on chaste and inclusivity, Genesis 21. Popular media. The narrative's themes, amplified by interpretations, resonate in film, theater, and music, from biblical epics to modern retellings, broadening their cultural reach. Contemporary relevance. Spirituality and ethics. Rabbinic and mystical insights inspire modern Jewish spirituality, with Hasidic and renewal movements drawing on the Zohar for meditation and ethics. They inform secular ethics, emphasizing compassion and growth. Interfaith and social justice. The universal blessing, Genesis 12:3, and Hagar's story support interfaith dialogue and advocacy for marginalized groups, addressing global issues like migration and equity. Cultural preservation. The interpretations ensure the narrative's relevance, with digital Torah study and interfaith platforms preserving midrashic and Kabbalistic insights for new generations. 7. Synthesis. A living text through interpretation. Rabbinic and mystical interpretations transform Genesis 12:36 into a living text, uncovering theological, ethical, and spiritual depths that resonate across centuries. Rabbinic exegesis. Through Bereshit Rabbah, Talmud, Rashi, and Ramban, employs midrash, textual analysis, and ethical reflection to reveal the patriarchs as moral exemplars whose covenantal journey prefigures Israel's destiny. Mystical interpretations, led by the Zohar, view the narratives as cosmic allegories, with the patriarchs embodying Sphirot and their actions aligning divine and human realms. Together, these traditions amplify themes of covenant, faith, providence, human frailty, and land, addressing Jewish communal needs from the Second Temple period to modernity. Rooted in historical contexts, exilic hope, medieval challenges, and oral traditions, the interpretations shape Jewish liturgy, education, and identity, while influencing Christian, Islamic, and secular thought. Their contemporary relevance lies in fostering spirituality, ethics, and interfaith dialogue, ensuring Genesis 12:36's enduring impact as a text of faith, compassion, and universal hope, preparing for the Torah's redemptive arc. Thank you for watching Big Breaking News of America. Make sure to subscribe and turn on the bell icon for more news updates. Share our channel with your friends and family members, leave a like for more videos and express your thoughts under comment section.